What could happen if we take our workforce to new heights? Workforce on the Mic, presented by NAUDIP, brings you inspirational stories, innovative solutions, and expert insights that are shaping the future of the workforce. Tune in for dynamic conversations that motivate and transform the workforce development community. And now, on to the episode.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, all you workforce warriors across the country. Welcome to today's episode of Workforce on the Mic, presented by NAUDIP. I am Alexis Franks, your Director of Membership for the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. And in today's episode, we are breaking barriers and celebrating abilities in workforce. In celebration of Disability Employment Awareness Month, we're shining a spotlight on the importance of policies that create inclusion and employment opportunities for those with disabilities. So we are excited to explore the tools and resources workforce professionals can bring to our communities today. And our conversation isn't just about raising awareness. It's about taking action and exploring best practices that help truly foster inclusive work environments. So, on the mic today, we have Ms. Kate Jackson, Policy Associate for the Yang Tan Institute on Employment and Disability at Cornell University. Welcome to you, Kate.
Thank you so much, Alexis, and thanks for having me today. I'm excited about this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I know, Kate, in our previous conversations, we had a lot of discussion about a little bit about you and your background. And I thought it was interesting that you started out as a social studies teacher and ended up working in policy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I always tell people I think in timelines, I think because of my original training. So yeah, I started my kind of career and training as a social studies teacher. I live in upstate New York, which I guess is technically Western New York. We're near Canada. So I went to SUNY Geneseo, where I studied social studies and worked at schools in Maine and New York, and actually was in Maine. It was a project with eighth graders where I got really jazzed about policy. So you mentioned I'm a policy associate. So we traveled to the state capitol and we worked on learning advocacy skills, and I just really loved it. And I got really passionate about wanting to get involved in that as my career. So I moved to Washington, D.C. for a couple of years. I got a master's in public policy, and I'm actually defending my dissertation. I'm going to have hopefully a PhD in education policy as of next Thursday at 11 a.m. So policy is what I kind of live and breathe right now. And it's the topic today of employment and disability is the policy space that I exist in and have for maybe the past 10 years. So it started with a group of eighth graders, but I've really taken it and ran with it. And I love it. I do think in timelines, but I think also I love the politics, the policy at different levels of government, all of that. So I think it all actually is interconnected, my roots in teaching and where I've ended up.
That is awesome. It's so interesting to hear how we kind of end up on our journey.
Yeah, right.
And you never know what you've done to impact an eighth grader, but you also ended up impacting yourself. So that is awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's dive right in because I do want to learn a little bit more about the policy side of things. So my question for you is, what role do policies play in workforce development programs that help support employees with disabilities?
Oh, that could be a whole half-hour conversation in and of itself. And I think the way we're set up, there's federal policies, and I don't want to be too boring, but there's federal policies that impact youth and young adults and adults with disabilities through their employment journeys. There's state policies and local policies. So I really think, and the interconnection of all of those levels certainly impacts access to services, that support someone on their employment journey. So, we could get really specific and talk about different policies. IOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, certainly there's a Title IV is disability specific and supports vocational rehabilitation across the country. So there are specific policies that do impact employment programs and access for people with disabilities. And a lot of what I do is the evaluation of how are those policies working? Are they really moving people into those good jobs that we talk about? I think we've come a long way in the past couple of decades in terms of policy, but we've got a long way to go. The Americans with Disabilities Act that was signed in 1990 has been amended, but I think there's a lot of growth there in terms of access and equality for people with disabilities. So, like I said, this could be a whole topic or a whole podcast on its own, but I think there's a lot there and there's a lot of resources too if this is an area that you're interested in. The Office for Disability Employment Policy, ODEP at the Department of Labor, the policy is in their name. And so they've got a lot of different resources that are out there that are publicly available.
That's awesome to hear. I think with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, many of our members are familiar with the services that are provided for veterans, for youth, for adults and dislocated workers, but maybe haven't taken that opportunity to really dive deep into what policies are in existence for employees with disabilities. And if they don't know the law itself, do they know the people that do understand those programs or that are working in those programs every day and consistently partner with them? So I'm glad you brought that up and really taking the time to take your own deep dive into what is in existence for those that we might serve in our career centers. So thank you for sharing that. You talked a little bit too about resources and tools that professionals might be able to use. Are there any specifically that you think we should keep at the top of the list?
Yeah, I mentioned ODEP, the Office for Disability Employment Policy, and they do have a number of centers and resources that are focused on providing resources and tools to the field. So CAPE Youth, the Center for Advancing Policy on Employment for Youth, is a center that I'm involved in my role at Cornell. CAPE Youth is a collaboration between the Department of Labor, ODEP, the Council of State Governments, our institute at Cornell, the Interwork Institute at San Diego State University, and then NODEP. And this center works to improve employment outcomes for youth and young adults with disabilities by technical assistance, support, research, all targeted towards policymakers. So I think this question gets at who are you? What's your, if you're a workforce development professional, I think a lot of times you do interact with policy. So the resources that we're putting out through CAPE Youth could totally be relevant to you. There are other centers, again, that ODEP has that are, I think maybe would have practical implications working with workforce as a workforce development professional. Ask Jan is a free guidance tool, technical assistance on accommodations and the ADA. So you can get on there. They have different resources. I am supporting someone with ADHD, and there are a list of potential accommodations for that disability category. So they have really specific resources that are really practical in nature. ODEP has the Employer Assistance Resource Network on Disability Inclusion. If you're a business person, there are a lot of resources on there for employers on supporting recruiting, hiring, retaining, advancing, helping people advance in employment, people with disabilities. So like I said, if you jump on that website, I think there are a lot of different resources that ODEP has created that could be really useful. The other thing I think I wanted to plug was the idea of universal design. And I don't know if that's a concept that's familiar to you.
No, please feel free to explain.
Okay. I think when you're designing anything, right? So the design is in the term. It's really making the space, the tool, the curriculum, the system usable to the most diverse range of people possible. So when you're designing something, you're designing it universally. And like the example of the walkway intended for people who are using wheelchairs, but also supports a mom with a stroller. Like that idea that when things are designed universally, they support all people who have all different needs. And so I think when we're just designing systems or training programs, like the more that we can focus on universal design principles, the better access people are going to have to programming. So I think there's a lot of different resources on universal design, or in the education space, it's called UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. So there's a ton of resources on universal design. And I think that just like pushes the envelope a little bit and thinking innovatively about design.
Absolutely. I think that's good to note for a lot of our members too that may be housed in a career center and may be thinking, how can I design our space to be inclusive of those that are coming into the office as well? So I love that you shared that. I had not heard of universal design. So you're teaching us something new today.
Learn
Great.
something new every day. This is
Every
good.
day, yes. So, Kate, I know we talked a little bit too about, you mentioned that policy has come so far. We still got a long way to go. So, what can we do as professionals or just those in the community? How can we advocate really for longer systemic or larger systemic changes to promote inclusivity for those with disabilities?
That's a really interesting question. And I think a lot of times when we're in these situations where everything is so regulated that we get focused on compliance instead of thinking innovatively. And as a business, for example, like I want to make sure I comply with the ADA. Okay, let's take a couple steps backwards and let's think innovatively about how we can universally design our workplace so that it's accessible to all people. And I think that idea is true for programs, for policies. I think moving beyond compliance into the innovation space, and that's really difficult to do when you're talking about funding cuts and staffing crises and competing priorities. I think it's tough, but thinking innovatively, I just really think that's going to push the system forward. And we have policies that a policy that started in the 30s is still impacting the way we pay people with disabilities, and flipping some of those on, in a perfect world, I think it's really shaking the system up is, I think, sometimes what needs to happen to really move toward that inclusive, accessible workplace for all type goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you're exactly right. We're in a new age where innovation is really priority, especially in workforce programs. So if we change our mindset and think a little bit more innovative and out of the box for how we're providing services and how we're getting access to people that really need good jobs, I think that's going to push the system forward as well. I appreciate you sharing that. And this month, I know the theme for Disability Employment Awareness Month is access to good jobs for all. So that is definitely something that we want to support and an idea that we want to support and see pushed forward. So, Kate, not to put you on the spot again, but that term, that theme of good job, access to good jobs for all, what does that mean to you?
This is another one where we could do a whole podcast on just this question. For me, going back to that WIOA has a definition for competitive integrated employment. And I think a lot of the elements of that definition really speak to what good jobs look like. In a disability context for all, we mean people with and without disabilities when we're talking about all people. And disability is a really heterogeneous group. The disability identity is varied. There's lots of ways to talk about it and say it. There's lots of different disability categories. So when we say good jobs for all means all, people with significant disabilities. And getting back to that competitive integrated employment definition, I think there's elements that were written into that definition that are really important. When we talk about full or part-time work, It's work that leads to economic self-sufficiency. So people are able to live and thrive in their communities, that you're a person with a disability making the same wage as somebody without a disability for the same job, that you're a person with a disability getting access to the same benefits. And again, we could have a whole conversation on navigating benefits because that's a really complex issue. So if you're a person with a disability receiving Medicaid, there's a lot of implications for work. There's a lot of resources to support you navigating that, but I think it's access to equal opportunity is at the core. It's opportunities for advancement. So a lot of times in the disability space, it'll be this person got a job, they've been out of work for 10 years, and now they're working at a grocery store stocking. Okay, that's wonderful. I'm so excited for that person, but is that what we want for them for the rest of their life? Or are we providing them opportunities for advancement as we would any other employee? Are we providing them with mentorship, access to training programs? So I think that advancement piece is so important when we look at good jobs. Again, some of these topics are really nuanced in the disability field, but an integrated location, when I said that we could talk about this forever, I'm not sure if you're familiar with sub-minimum wage, but people with disabilities can still make sub-minimum wage if an organization has a 14C certificate. And so if you're making less than minimum wage, economic self-sufficiency isn't going to happen. And so the access to good jobs, the policy change piece related to 14C, I think, is really complicated. And there's a lot of different political reasons why we're at the place we are, both in terms of state and federal policy. But I think really pushing the envelope in terms of what people have access to, really with that end goal of equal opportunity, is what I think of when I think of access to good jobs.
Wow. Okay. You're schooling me today, Kate.
Oh.
You really are. I did not know about the sub-minimum wage. So that is a really important thing that we all as professionals need to be thinking about. And here on Workforce on the Mic, I don't know if you know, but we always have mic drop moments. So I think today's mic drop moment is all means all. We want access to good jobs for all. And you said it, all means all. And I think that's something that we can really take away from our discussion today is everyone, every single person in our community deserves the access to a good job. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us too. So Kate, we've had a great discussion today. I know that we've covered a lot. I have one last question for you before we start to wrap up. So I know probably get to see a lot of these things, the universal design, some of those innovative practices. Is there any specific examples that you like to share of what you've seen that really works in the community?
Yes, I love that question. I started my career in the disability employment space as the project search coordinator in New York State. And so Project Search is a business-led full immersion internship program. So when we're talking about programming, I think access to authentic business-led programming is so critical. We know that access to that type of opportunity leads to employment long term, and you're not only getting a job, but you're retaining your job. So Project Search, there are, I don't know, I've lost track because I'm not doing it currently, but there are over 500 programs at least across the country that take place in a business that provide internship opportunities to individuals with significant disabilities. And their success rate is over 70% the last time I checked. So a really evidence-based model that leads to good jobs, back to that idea of good jobs. So there are programs out there that exist. You're not having to reinvent the wheel, develop all new programs, curriculum, things like that. So Project Search, I would highly encourage if you're wanting to start something innovative in your community and you don't already have a Project Search program, that would be a wonderful thing to get involved in. Customized employment, that is a partnership between a business and an employer where you're looking at a personalized role that builds on the skills of the person with a disability, but also fills a business need. I think is a really new and innovative I don't know, programs it's not a program, but like a design philosophy. I think looking at the tenets of customized employment could be something that somebody explores. I would just encourage, if you're getting on some of these ODEP disability type organizations, there are a lot of evidence-based programs that are out there. So I would highlight that. And also I mentioned Cape Youth. We have a number of resources on our website, policy briefs related to people with disabilities who also have been involved in the justice system, the trauma-informed care and mental health, intersecting identities, apprenticeships. So a lot of I think, similar terms that you're hearing in your workforce development system, we're creating resources that can be helpful to you. So I would encourage jumping on that website.
Absolutely. Those are some great tools and resources to share. And I know that just looking at the website as well, there's toolkits that we encourage the professionals that we come across to check out as well as a free resource. So thank you so much for sharing that. If you have any other call to action, how can any individual get in touch with you or learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I highly encourage kjackson at cornell.edu. Please feel free to reach out to me. I think there are, again, going back to who you are and what you're wanting to get involved in, there are systems level advocacy groups working on access to good jobs for all, employment first, that employment is what we're looking at for everybody. I would just encourage you to stay informed and get involved. And there's a lot out there that you can kind of learn more and get involved. So I appreciate this opportunity so much to have the conversation and know that it won't be our last.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again, Kate. You've definitely helped us to understand how we can break some barriers ourselves and really take this month to celebrate the abilities that are in our workforce. I did want to share one more thing. There is an upcoming event hosted by the Department of Labor and ODEP. This is an online webinar called Good Jobs Change Lives, helping disabled workers to get ahead. And that'll be held on October 24th from 2 to 3:15 Eastern Standard Time. So please, that's another way that we can learn more and get access to more resources. That panel discussion will be online. So please make sure you take the opportunity to register and check out that event as well. Kate, thank you so much again. We appreciate you joining us today for this second episode of Workforce on the Mic, presented by NAUDUP. And I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation in the future as well.
Thank you so much, Alexis.
Thank you for listening to Workforce on the Mic, presented by NAUDUP. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about NAUDUP and to become a member, visit www.naudup.org. That's www.nawdp.org.